All right. Martin, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. Thank you very much for coming out tonight from your living rooms or wherever. Like Janet said, my name is Martin Hamann, and I'm the technical advisor to the Richmond Shoreline Alliance. And uh, I've been spending the last few months reviewing a lot of the technical documents that are out at the Zeneca site. Janet and I have spoken to the DTSC case officer on this project. The goal of this meeting tonight is to give an update on what is going on at the Zeneca site, delve into some of the remedial methods, the cleanup methods that are going on, and then at the end of the call of this talk, if there's any questions, I'll certainly try to answer them. So let's go ahead and the agenda is I'm going to talk for a very short amount of time of the history of the Zeneca site, what's going on out there, some of the chemicals, and then delve a little bit into the different cleanup tools that are being used at the site and how they're performing. And then near the end, going to talk about how uh, climate change, how global sea level rise and groundwater rise may impact the site. So as far as the history, uh, this site has, I've outlined it in red. And here in the very bottom of the area is the San Francisco Bay. It's sort of marshy out here. And I'm going to draw attention to this little line right here. This is a bike path or a walking path that I've been on, and I'm sure many of you are aware of. And it's going to come into play in a couple slides near the end where we talk about sea level rise. But we have the site, and it's been an industrial site for well over 100 years. It's used to have huge train lines going into it, dropping off chemicals. Did a lot of things with different acids. They handle pesticides, different agricultural chemicals, and uh, back then there were very little, if no, regulations regarding disposal of hazardous chemicals. Uh, Commonly, things were dumped or just not really attended if they were leaked. The only reason you would stop a leak from happening is it is disturbing one of your other operations, or it's so expensive that you need to keep it from leaking further. And so over time, these contaminants have have entered into the ground and then into the groundwater, and then some of them have been discharged into the bay. Um, so this is an old picture from 1962, and we're sort of looking at the site from the land side. Over here is the bay, and then this right here is the Zeneca site. And we have a couple things going on. This area circled here, these were ponds where they would place liquids that they usually are no longer needing or using, and they're right by the bay. Other things here on the site, and I spend a lot of my time in my career looking at aerial photos, so I can spot these things and sort of identify what might be going on. There's above ground storage tanks here. These typically will store chemicals, and then more storage here, and then a lot of these industrial buildings also they would manufacture or process chemicals. So, and this is a photo from 1962. There's photos that go back almost 100 years now, and there's been a lot of industrial activity. So there's two main contaminants at the Zeneca site. There's actually quite a few more, but the main ones are what are called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs is the jargon we use. And these are volatile chemicals. So think of something like gasoline or fingernail polish remover, acetone. You open up the container and you don't need to be very close to it and you smell it. That's because it's volatile. It easily gets into the air. And then there's also chemicals called heavy metals, and these are things like lead, arsenic, copper, nickel, zinc, and they don't evaporate. You really don't know whether they're there or not. Sometimes you can see them from a color change, but these are chemicals that if they're consumed by humans and some plants and animals, they can affect and impact them. And both VOCs and heavy metals in high enough concentrations can be harmful to humans, as well as marine life, bird life, and the life that is adjacent to the facility. So here's a very simple showing of how contamination gets into the ground. And it's just a few steps. First, contamination will get into the soil, and that's by spills or leaks that just soak into the soil. Imagine pouring a glass of water into the soil. If that water were gasoline, it's the same thing. It just gets into the soil. Also dumping. In industrial situations, you do have dumping going on, and so that will also contribute to contamination. And then what happens is if you spill enough of it, leak enough of it, or rainwater comes, it actually pushes it down deep into the ground and it gets into the groundwater. Pretty much anywhere in Richmond, if you were to dig a hole where you're standing in Richmond, you dig anywhere from 5 to 50 feet and you will reach groundwater. And so that's the same same thing going on over here, where groundwater at the Zeneca site is actually between, it's about 4 to 7 feet before you of dry soil before you reach groundwater. And so once the chemicals are in the ground and in the groundwater, they make what's called a plume, which is a zone of contaminated water. And because here in the Zeneca site, we're actually close to the bay, the contaminant plume gets moved around because of high tides and because of storms and things like that. And so the plume spreads out and affects a lot of the groundwater. And so the current status at the Zeneca site is the groundwater has high levels of VOCs and heavy metals, and these concentrations do pose a risk to aquatic life and to human health. Now, the site is essentially vacant, so it's not like there are humans living on the site right now, and which is part of the reason that they're cleaning up the site now. I understand the goal is to get the site into a different use, which may include occupancy by humans. And so it's very important that the site be cleaned up so that humans, as well as the aquatic life and the bay, is protected from these chemicals. So moving on, what I'm going to be talking about today is the four main types of cleanup techniques that are going on at the site. And for each one, I'm going to be answering a couple of different questions. First is, what is it and how does it work? What sort of chemicals does it treat? Because there's really no clean all sort of technology. And then how effective can the technology be? What are some of its weaknesses? as well as how might it not be used correctly. And then the real important question is, how is it actually working at the Zeneca site? Is it being effective? Is it not being effective, et cetera? So the first tool is called soil vapor extraction. And you can think of it just as a vacuum cleaner. Just as a vacuum cleaner will clean little pieces of dirt out of your carpet, soil vapor extraction does something similar where you will get a you will install wells into the soil at certain intervals, and you then have a machine that sucks the air out of those wells, and it goes from there into a carbon filter and is discharged. And so the volatile chemicals will will get sucked out of the soil, and they actually get deposited into the carbon filter, and those carbon filters are replaced at a regular interval. So you think of it as a giant vacuum cleaner. It's good for volatile chemicals. It's not really good for anything else. And we talked about heavy metals. It has no effect on heavy metals. And soil vapor extraction is truly that. It works on soil. It doesn't work on groundwater. So how effective can soil vapor extraction be? It can be super effective. I use it in my practice. Like Janet said, I've been in this business for over 35 years, and soil vapor extraction is a very tested and good way of getting volatile chemicals out from the ground. It is more effective in sandy and more granular soils. Uh, it doesn't do that well with clay-like soils, and there are quite a few clay-like soils at Zeneca because it's in a marshy area, a swampy area. So those are really fine-grained soils. And also, it doesn't do well when groundwater is shallow. And having water at 5 to 10 feet is considered shallow, which is what we're seeing at the Zeneca site. And so it actually struggles being effective in really thin soil zones. Some of the common mistakes with this sort of system is the wells are too far apart. So it's like cleaning up on your rug. You only clean up one part and you only clean up another part. You have to really uh, put wells everywhere that need to be cleaned up. And then in a case like the Zeneca site, although I haven't seen it, haven't seen evidence of it, you can get what's called short circuiting, where you don't have a proper seal on the well, and you just end up sucking your atmospheric air rather than the soil vapor. And then also with this technology, cleaning up the ground, you need to be careful that you're not sucking in water. So here's the big question: how effective is it at Zeneca? And the most current report says that the technology is the effectiveness is slowing down. This is common for soil vapor extraction, where you clean up a lot at the very beginning, and then over time you clean up less and less and less, and it can be thought of diminishing returns. And the most current report, they removed a total of 69 pounds of volatile organic compounds, with only 2 pounds being removed during the last year. And so 2 pounds over the course of a year is not much. And 69 pounds since installation is not that much. I have a site I'm working on in Southern California, which has a lot higher concentrations than what we're seeing here. But I've removed over 400 pounds of volatile chemicals using this system. Over here at Zeneca, the concentrations are high, but not as high as that other site. So it's not surprising that it's only removed 69, but uh, it, only removing 2 pounds over the course of a year is not a lot. And also, a big caveat is the system has been shut down for over 5 months due to high groundwater levels. And like I said, it's hard to extract from a very thin layer. And so they actually had to shut down the system because they were bringing water into the system. And also, and this is sort of specific to the Zeneca site, there's one of the volatile organic chemicals has this really long name, cis 1,2-dichloroethene. Um, that is actually not really being filtered out by the carbon, and it's at relatively elevated concentrations. I don't think it's above a concentration that requires that the system be shut down or retooled, but the carbon is not really fully getting all the chemicals that are being pulled out of the ground. So my assessment is that soil vapor extraction at Zeneca in the areas that they're doing it is been limited in its effectiveness. And in addition to being limited in its effectiveness, it's less limited or it's more limited now than it has been in the past. And it's vulnerable to flooding. And that's going to be a big deal when we consider global sea level rise. Now, the one caveat as well on that, I do want to paint a balanced picture on this. Uh, Soil vapor extraction is not usually a permanent solution, where usually you use it to clean up areas, and then once they're cleaned up, or once you do get the asymptotic levels where there's only diminishing benefit for keeping it on, then you will do something else. But it is limited. Okay, let's go talk about tool number two. And this one is a biologically active permeable barrier. And you could think of it as an underground fence or an underground wall. They usually call it a wall, but a wall denotes that things from one side don't get to the other. This is actually a permeable barrier. So liquid on one side of the barrier is free to pass to the other side of the barrier. And this little figure is a little cartoon. Basically, the gray box is a trench that is dug and then backfilled with a filter material, and it's usually some sort of organic rich matter. It's like a compost. And so what you have on one side, you have contaminated groundwater, and it passes through this barrier, this filter, and the metals actually precipitate out. So they get removed from the groundwater. And so as the contaminated water passes through, it comes out cleaner on the other end. And so that's the mechanics of how it works. You could think of it like just like a filter. Um, it works with heavy metals. It doesn't really work with volatile chemicals. Sometimes there's a very minor benefit from that, but it's really to remove the heavy metals. And in on paper, reactive barriers are effective. They're usually used as a last line of defense, and they're sort of used that way here, where you have the barrier very close to the bay, and it's to help prevent heavy metals entering the marsh and the bay areas. Some of the weaknesses of the biologically active permeable barrier is that this material gets used up. It's like if any of you have oil filters for your car, you know that every few months you have to change the oil filter. Um, and so this thing over time will become less effective. Uh, Also, it's not hasn't really been shown to be effective for significantly reducing the concentrations of arsenic, which is a heavy metal in the groundwater. And then also it can get clogged as it gets used up. And some of the design mistakes are just not making the wall thick enough. The water has to have what's called residence time. So as it moves through the filter, if it moves through in just 1 second, it may not be as effective if it takes a day to pass all the way through the filter. So the way you do that is you make the filter thick enough, so you make the wall thick enough to make sure it's effective. And then sometimes you'll have gaps or what are called preferential pathways where water will quickly flow through without really being cleaned up. And then one of the things behind one of these barrier walls is you have to be monitoring it all the time to understand what's going on. Um, is it effective at the Zeneca site? Um, and I think it is fairly effective. It's not foolproof and it's not 100% effective, but it is fairly effective. It's over 20 years old now. It was built back in 2002. The reports identify it as continuing to functioning as designed. But looking at some of the data, they have monitoring wells on both the contaminated side and the bay side of the barrier, and uh, there are still concentrations of heavy metals that appear on the bay side. And also, a particular note is arsenic seems to not really be that well filtered out by this system. And then another concern, and I'll talk about it more in the sea level rise section, but sea level rise and tidal fluctuations can also impact the effectiveness of this. So um, my overall assessment is I think it's better than nothing. It's cleaning some of the material up, but it's not 100% effective. And also, I have some concerns over the age of the system, and I'm not sure what the plan is to ensure that it continues to be effective over time. So let's talk about the next tool. Just a reminder, I'm going to talk about 4 tools. So tool number 3 is groundwater injections. And these are where you go and you drill holes into the ground, into the groundwater, and then you inject chemicals into the ground to clean up the bad chemicals that are there. And so what they do is they you inject tiny, almost microscopic size iron into the ground, as well as a food source. And it's usually like a vegetable oil. And these are food grade materials. So they're not introducing worse chemicals to clean up the other chemicals. These are generally somewhat benign substances. And what happens is the iron cleans up, it reacts with the volatile chemicals almost immediately. And then the food source, the vegetable oil, there are bacteria in the groundwater and in the soil, and the vegetable oil helps those bacteria grow, and as they grow, they actually will they will consume, they will eat the volatile chemicals and convert those into non-toxic endpoints. So this system is just for groundwater treatment. It doesn't really do anything for the soil. Although there are some soil methods of doing it, this is just for groundwater. And it can be useful in cleaning up groundwater. I use this in my practice. Some of the weaknesses, it's a little bit like the soil vapor extraction in that you need to have enough holes punched in the ground and put in enough chemicals to be effective. Also, it can be somewhat slow. Bacteria are not super fast eaters. And so we're talking years of having to wait for some response. There'll be an immediate response from the iron, but a little bit harder with the bacteria. And then also one of the things is there's unintended consequences. And I said the chemicals that we inject into the ground themselves aren't necessarily toxic, but sometimes they will modify the pH of the groundwater. And so heavy metals that were previously not a problem because they were not dissolved in the groundwater may be dissolved into the groundwater. And we're actually seeing a little bit of that at the Zeneca site. And so the question du jour, is it effective at Zeneca? And the answer is don't know yet. It's just started. They have some preliminary data which shows some progress or some promise, but excuse me, but it's just started. And like I said, there's some metals, notably arsenic and nickel, that have increased in nearby wells, and so they're going to need to monitor that to make sure that over a further distance, understand whether those heavy metals stay dissolved or precipitate back into the solid form. So my assessment is, once again, these tools that I'm talking about, these are all time-tested tools that I've used in my practice. I know how they work. Um, this has a promise of helping, but it just needs to be monitored to understand whether there's any sort of adverse unintended consequence with the heavy metals. The last tool is a tool that hasn't really been implemented out there yet. It's called capping, and this is one where it basically is not a cleanup tool. It's just a thick layer of something over the contamination so that humans and other things can't get to the contamination. Think of it as closing off a room in your house. As long as the door is locked and no one can get in it, whatever's in there shouldn't be able to get out. And so it's basically you put it could be anything from soil to asphalt to concrete. Typically, when there are humans involved, it'll be a asphalt or a concrete cap, just to make sure that those things below do not get exposed to the things above. Like I said, it really doesn't treat anything. Um, it's effective, uh, mostly for less effective for volatile chemicals, more effective for non-volatile chemicals like heavy metals. But it's one of those things where you need to keep understanding what the condition of the cap is. The weakness, and I have seen this, damage by erosion, earthquakes, tree roots. Even I've seen things like like rodents, little chipmunks or squirrels will dig into some of these caps, and they will get into the contaminated soil and bring that soil up as they dig around. And so it needs to be well constructed, and it's basically a forever uh, thing that needs to be attended to. You don't just install a cap and say you're done. If you've ever been to a strip mall that has an old parking lot, you'll see how over time the asphalt cracks and plants start growing up in between it. And that's the same thing with these caps. You need to maintain them forever. It's not yet working at Zeneca. They do have a an area that is capped somewhat, but it's not really a permanent cap, and it's somewhat effective now because there's really no humans on the site. But that cap, my understanding and my review of some of the documents, they do get cracks in it. They have to constantly be maintaining it. So let's talk about sea level rise. I'll show in my next slide the picture of the Zeneca site, proximity to the bay. But Zeneca is at a very low-lying area, and any change in sea level will be experienced at the Zeneca site. And so the I've seen sea level has become an interest in the environmental topic for quite a while, but the regulators, the DTSC and the Water Board, they're now starting to pay more attention to it. And the concern is all of these sites that are near coastal areas, how will sea level rise affect the contamination? Because a lot of the contamination at Zeneca is still in place. They buried contamination in the ground at what was a dry spot when they buried it. But over time, if the sea level and when the sea level were to rise, it will now be underwater, and chemicals can leach out of those, otherwise dry contaminated zones and get into the water. And like my second bullet says, it's not a matter of if sea level rises, but more a matter of when and how much. And there is some debate over how much sea level may rise, but even without wading too far into that, we've already seen effects of water table rising uh, in the soil vapor extraction, rendering it useless for 5 months out of last year, for example. And also, just to clarify, when the sea level rises, the groundwater, especially in the coastal zones, will typically rise with it. So a 1 foot rise in sea level will result in a corresponding rise in the groundwater table as well. So I'm showing you two maps here. One has the date of 2040, which is what, 15 years from now, and the other one is 2100. And these maps there's some sea level rise tools. This one is based on an organization that provides those tools, as well as NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association. But you'll remember I showed you this little bike path here, this walkway and bike path. Um, that was dry. That's dry today. And in 2040, these models that I'm showing you are more of the worst case scenario. Um, uh, in 2040, it shows this blue right here is where the shoreline is modeled to be. And so this bike path will now be underwater in approximately 15 years if the worst case of sea level rise happens. You'll also notice some of these ponds are underwater. And then looking further, 2100, so 75 years from now, many of us may not be around, but hopefully some of our children and grandchildren will be around. And it really shows, you can see the shoreline where the water is now. It completely inundates this whole part here. And this is the Zeneca site here. And so large swaths of the Zeneca site are going to be underwater. So how does sea level rise impact the cleanup at Zeneca, and specifically the four tools? I think it impacts it a lot. All is not lost, but it does impact it. Soil vapor extraction will become less and less feasible over time. And in part, there will be less and less dry soil to extract from. And so any sort of chemicals, volatile chemicals that are in the soil, as the groundwater rises, they will likely dissolve into the groundwater and impact the groundwater. The biologically active permeable barriers, those should continue to work. However, over time, if they get flooded, then you can have water just passing over it or passing around it. And so contaminated water can certainly continue to flow through the bay. The in situ treatment, the injections, the same thing. You now have more water to address, and so it will become less effective. And then the capping, as long as the cap is dry, it should remain effective. But if you have a cap underwater, usually that's not going to help anything. So my bottom line admonition is the cleanup that we have right now at Zeneca is designed for today's environment. There is some consideration about sea level rise, but I think they're not looking far enough into the future. And so there's a reasonable potential that over time, if there are residual contaminants at Zeneca, as sea level rises, as the groundwater rises, those contaminants will get into the groundwater, will dissolve into the groundwater, and will impact that area. So this is where you all become involved. You're the community. You're the ones who are being affected by this more than others. And so it's you showing up here is very important, but also staying informed, asking questions of the regulators, asking questions of the city council members, asking questions of the developers, those sorts of things. You need to make your voices heard. You need to participate in the process of submitting comments, attending meetings, and just making sure that that your interests are being heard and evaluated and addressed. And Janet and Lisa had asked me, like, okay, Martin, you're the scientist. You've seen a lot of these things. What are your thoughts? What are your things that are sort of grinding on you? And I came up with a few here, and one is like, I don't really think that the soil vapor extraction has been that effective. And so what are their plans of cleaning up the volatile chemicals in the soil? Um, one tool that we didn't discuss, which is it's a great tool. It has some downside, some side effects, is removing the material, excavating it out. That's a very permanent solution for that area. Um, Basically, you're transferring the problem somewhere else, but some other places are able to handle it better than maybe a coastal marine area. Um, and also there's logistics, there's truck traffic, there's a lot of other things that come along with it. But my key concerns for the DTSC, which is a regulatory agency, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, is like what are their plans for the SVE? The injections that have been going on in the ground, they appear to have mobilized some heavy metals, and is that being sufficiently monitored to ensure that those heavy metals now aren't contributing a bigger problem to the site? What are what's going on with the reactive barrier? 20, it's over 20 years old. How long do they expect it to last? What do they plan to do once it's done? Are they going to put another one in? Are they going to put more in? Those sorts of questions. And then also, what is their cap design? I don't recall seeing what their cap design was, but we want to make sure it's robust enough that it is impervious to any sort of damage where it can't be readily fixed, and it's an ongoing issue. And then the more general question is, yeah, you are considering sea level rise, but how far out are you considering sea level rise? Are you considering it 10 years from now, or 50 years from now, or however long? So my summary is, the cleanup at Zeneca is complex. It's it's had over 100 years of opportunity to get contaminated, and so there's lots of different contaminants, lots of different areas, um, and the fact that they're cleaning it up is a good thing. There's always ways that they can clean it up better and faster. I know that uh, there there's also a balance of different priorities. Um, if I had a magic wand, I would want it done faster and more thoroughly. But I also understand that there are some constraints. And so the goal as the community should be to partner with the regulators to be more vocal, to ensure that the cleanup is robust, is protective of the community, as well as for future generations, not just this generation or the next, but for future generations. So with that, I'll stop talking. I'll open it up to questions, and also Richmond Shoreline Alliance.org is a good resource for a lot of things that are going on out there, and they can help a lot as well.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was incredible. There's a lot of information there. I see three hands up.
Can you?
Uh,
They're going to.
okay.
Hello.
Yeah, Michael.
Hi. So, Jane, you're off. Yes. Hi, Michael Glickson. Two things. When I attended the hearings, DTSC deciding how to do the cleanup, as many of us did, of course, I thought the cap was like the thing. And the fact that the cap hasn't even started yet, probably even fully designed, is again, not being very well informed. But so that's one thing. How did that kind of slip, or why was that promoted as the thing they were going to do? And I went on a tour of the site not long ago that I think Janet gave, or somebody else with her. And I asked, so has DTSC done what they thought they needed to do before they could build 4,000 apartments? And I kind of said, yeah, they're done doing what they're going to do. And they're just going to monitor the groundwater or the soil contamination. And when it gets good enough, then this developer can come build 4,000 apartments. So things seem to be quite different than that. And I'm really glad to be informed from what you had to say. So thank you, Martin.
Yeah, Michael, I'd like to respond just quickly to that. Caps are not difficult to design. There is an existing cap out there, but that was a temporary cap, and I think it's actually outlived its planned life. It's more of like a salty crust in spots. Caps are meant to prevent rainwater from trickling down, prevent any sort of creatures from burrowing through and stuff like that. Caps can be effective. It's basically you're basically burying the problem, and as long as you can keep the problem away, that is a tool, and I've used caps before, so I don't want to completely discount them, but in light of sea level rise, where you now will have areas where chemicals that were otherwise dry, and wastes that were dry and under a cap, now as sea level rises, a cap may not be as effective, and so that's the concern.
Thank you, Martin. You outlined the problems with the cap, including the fact that earthquakes are a major issue, and they do have a fault offshore. There is a fault right offshore in addition to the Hayward Fault 2 miles away. We've got other questions here, so I will go to Ezra Romero. Please unmute. Thank you, Ezra.
Ezra Romero, I'm a reporter at KQED, cover climate. I've written about Zeneca a bit. Um, your presentation made it sound like the remedies are not adequate enough for future sea level rise or the future under in a warming climate. Is that a right synopsis of what you're saying?
I want to be careful about saying that, because if right now the site is being remediated, so presumably chemical concentrations tomorrow are going to be less than they are today. That's the general trajectory for remediations. So so the remedial technologies like the soil vapor extraction, that is typically not something that you keep running for more than a few years. 3 to 5 years is typical for soil vapor extraction. So it's a little tricky at the Zeneca site because groundwater is so shallow. So any rise in groundwater will affect that. Now, whether you'll see an appreciable difference in the next 5 years, that is what a lot of climate scientists debate, is how much different effects are over time. I think over longer periods of time, you can be more certain that that water levels will rise. But saying that by this particular date it'll be this high is more speculation. Um, the concerns that I have are there's uh, a lot of impacted material that was put into these basically they dug holes on the site, and they shoved contaminated material there, and they put this temporary cap over it. Um, and uh, and today that's fine, because these are things that are dry, and if something is dry, and water is not passing through it, it's just going to sit there. And we're talking like heavy metals or non-volatile chemicals. So if water levels were to rise and get into those areas that were previously dry, that have the contamination, then there's the opportunity for the water to leach out hazardous chemicals from those wastes. I'm not I've not seen that in any of the data, but considering the scenarios where water level rises to a point where some of those capped areas, um, uh, the Zeneca, I don't know if you recall the figure, but in fact, I'm going to share it just for a moment here, if I could. Can you? Yeah. Okay. Let me try to get my pointer to. Yeah. These areas here, this gray white stuff, this is their cap
We don't see
material.
what you're showing. Oh, now it is. Oh,
Yeah. This gray white stuff is their cap material, and this is where a lot of those solid wastes were placed. So in this future scenario, 75 years from now, and uh, parts of those are underwater, and so any sort of chemicals that were dry today, these models show that they appear to be that they will be wet at a future date. And
Can I
so
ask you a follow-up
that's what I'm
question?
saying.
Can I ask a
Yeah.
follow-up question on that? It's you mentioned that this is the remedies right now were designed for like the current situation and not the situation of the future. Are there remedies that you think could work in the like thinking if this were a plan to model for the future scenario of sea level rise in this place and groundwater rise? Are there like remedies that you think that you would implement in that there?
Um, there are there are some remedies, and some of them may be um, trying to aggressively remediate groundwater today from the volatile chemicals, soil and groundwater, because those are things that can be addressed. Like I alluded to, excavation is a good method. Now, having said that, it's probably one of the most expensive methods, and we're talking many acres, and so uh, what you'll end up doing is you dig out all this dirt, you have to take it somewhere. So you're putting it on roads, you're putting it on railroads, things like that, and it will then sit somewhere else, which presumably will be permitted to receive it and will be safe. But then you also have to go back and fill all these holes that you created with soil, and so uh, it's a lot. It's a lot. If uh, I've had sites where I've done excavation. I'm working on a site right now in San Francisco where we're ready to start an excavation, and logistically it's super expensive, and there's a lot of detractors. The same people who don't want the contamination there also are upset that there are vehicles driving around that will be carrying this material. So it's something like that would be, if you got rid of the problem, then sea level can rise all at once, and it's not going to be an issue.
Thank you. Stuart, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say that I was the Richmond Shoreline Alliance attorney in the trial court proceedings in two cases involving the Zeneca site. Unfortunately, at the moment, one of those cases we have lost permanently. The other case, we're still dealing with the Court of Appeal and trying to get it. Their trial court ruled against us in both cases. We're still trying to get the Court of Appeal to reverse that decision, but it's not really extremely likely. So it seems like the legal approach has unfortunately failed, at least for the time being. One of the things they've talked about, and I have put it in the chat, but they're talking about basically using the soil vapor extraction to remove the volatile organics. And they show that over time, the amount that they're extracting is growing down, and they're saying, oh, well, we're getting it all gone away. But my understanding of the site is that there are, if you will, lenses of clay soil distributed around in the site. And if some of the contamination is underneath those layers, I'm not sure that the SVE is going to be effective in taking those out. They'll still be there. And I think in some of the earlier model efforts, it appeared that there was a rebound. In other words, they would do the soil vapor extraction, the levels of organics would go down, and then they'd stop and the levels would come back up. So that's a concern I have. The other concern is a long-term concern and has to do with capping. Because as you say, the capping is effective in blocking stuff from coming up and coming out of the surface. But if you've got groundwater rise and sea level rise, the thing I have concern about is if you cap the surface and now the things can't rise up above the surface, they'll go sideways instead. And you may end up with mobilizing material offsite.
Sure, you're right. You're right about both things. Soil vapor extraction, it's common to see a rebound, especially when you have different types of soils where you have clays and sands. Usually what happens is the lion's share of the vacuum benefit goes through the sands, and you clean those up quickly. And so you say, okay, we're done cleaning up, but there's still contamination in those finer grained layers. And then when you stop the system, you do what's a rebound. They call it a rebound test, to test exactly for that, because the volatile chemicals in the clays will slowly permeate back out into the sandy material. There's no arguing that they've removed volatile chemicals from the subsurface. You can, if you have like sand, clay, if you have like multiple different layers, you can clean up deeper layers as well. On this site, because the depth of water is as shallow as I think 5 feet, and then it gets deeper as you go inland. But there's not tons of soil to clean up with volatile chemicals, just because the amount of soil before you reach groundwater is relatively thin. And then I do think that that the capping, it can serve as sort of like a cork, and so if things come up, it'll move out. However, if you put it underwater, I don't think that's the big concern. you're just going to have things everywhere.
And one other question, and this has to do with the idea of excavating. And one thought I'd had, and I don't know whether it's at all feasible, but one thought I had was, what if you were to excavate and at the site build a reactor to decontaminate the soil and put the soil in the reactor, react it, then take it out and put it back in, and essentially go through the site that way, removing soil, cleaning it up with a chemical reactor, and then putting it back, put the clean soil back in. It's going to be very expensive, but on the other hand, you don't end up having to transport it all and have the problem going somewhere else.
Yeah, for heavy metals, it's a little bit harder to do. What a lot of times what they will do is it's called fixation, where you mix the soil with something like a cement. So it physically binds everything together so that a lot less water passes through it, and the material doesn't dissolve into the water.
Yeah, the
Um,
regional board did that to some of the areas. They cut
yeah,
stuff out and mixed it with a lime and then solidified and then put it back in.
yeah, and that will help with that. It's not 100% effective, but it is, it's effective-ish.
Better than nothing.
Yeah.
Excellent questions. Um, David, and then we'll go to questions in the chat. You are still on mute, David.
No, still on mute.
Keep trying. Maybe put
Janet,
your
I think as host, you can unmute him.
uh mm, it says ask to unmute.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Nah. And we're asking. Okay, David, maybe you can put your question in the chat. So I will go to the chat. What happened to the questions? Okay. All right. So Anne Marie asked, I am understanding that the remediation efforts in place are inadequate, especially as we consider sea level rise. Clearly, this is going to have an increasing impact on human health. What is your opinion and/or advice about engaging public health, business owners, and future residents about this? I guess, Martin, that question is for you.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify. I'm a technical guy, and I'm not I'm not really trying to take sides on this thing. I know that there are some strong opinions on the development at the site. I've been focused mostly on the remediation and what may be left behind, as well as what may be left behind in the future under a sea level. Uh, I think becoming involved and being a squeaky wheel is what happens. I've been in this business a long time, and regulators uh, they tend to fear the public. They don't like public scrutiny of things, and so when the public is involved, they usually listen up to hear them out, and they will make decisions with having heard that. Usually, if there was no opposition at all on this site, uh, the cleanup would probably be a little bit different than what it is now, simply because there is there is all this oversight, uh, on all these eyes on this project. So I think that um, the remediation is ongoing. I know the people who are doing the remediation. This is a very small industry, and some are former colleagues of mine, and uh, I know their technical abilities and strengths, and this is being remediated in accordance with what the regulators are asking for.
Mhm. And
The
that's and that is part of the problem.
that's right, but also uh, in this business, uh, 15, 20 years ago, nobody was paying attention to soil vapor, which is a major pathway for contamination. It's evolved to now soil vapor is a significant component of a cleanup effort. Um, and then as early as, gosh, 3 to 5 years ago, nobody was really paying attention to sea level rise. And so a lot of the remedial thought at that time did not take some of these things into account. Soil vapor is being taken into account here, and uh, and there are also other ways. If there were to develop a residential structure on this property, depending on where they put it, they would likely have uh, some additional safeguards for soil vapor, so that soil vapor does not get into the living spaces of the housing units.
Thank you for that clarification. David, can you unmute now? There you go.
I can unmute now. So if anybody ever uses Zoom for the first time on a phone, you have to go to the app settings to unmute the microphone. So anyway, thank you, Janet. Thank you, Martin. It was a really interesting presentation. I'm a Marina Bay resident, and I'm also completing my undergrad in sustainability. And one of my learnings, something we came across, was phytoremediation. That is just using native plants, specific plants that actually feed on the toxins. They're located at a fairly shallow depth. You mentioned groundwater was a problem, so I'm just curious if you've considered that as a remediation tool.
Yeah, I've worked on sites where they've done phytoremediation, and it's effective. It's slow, and uh, it I it's not super. It's not really used a lot here. There may be some benefit for the phytoremediation, especially in the marshy areas. But a lot of that is you have to have specific plant species that take up the chemicals that you're wanting to take up. I haven't used it in 20 years, and I've really not come across that much since that time in phytoremediation. I think it has promise, but it's not as tested as these other things.
It seems that it's a somewhat of a natural remedy, especially when you're considering such a unique site that is dealing with much water coming in and going out. plants can actually help in flood zones to kind of, as a natural barrier. And when you're talking about the time scale of sea level rise, 40, 50 years, plants as a long-term solution should definitely be considered, especially when your options are so limited for such a unique and challenging area, just
Yeah, no, David, I would agree with that, and trying to stay impartial, I would suggest that those sorts of questions be asked of DTSC. Uh, is like, has it been considered? Uh, should it be considered, especially in light of the timescales that we are looking at? And uh, I think they like me, they might know of a few spots that have phytoremediation because they're overseeing a lot more sites than I ever do. But yeah, I think that's a valid point.
thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm really glad you brought that up, because it it seems like something that it has a lot of appeal, let's put it that way. I want to go to a question in the chat from Sarah. She is asking, is it currently safe for people using the section of the Bay Trail adjacent to the Zeneca site? Also, is it currently safe for residents living in Marina Bay?
Yeah, I, I try not to opine and say something is safe or unsafe. But I'll tell you this: the cleanup concentrations that are usually um, accepted are, are based on science that has a lot of safety factors put into it. Um, and a person a person who is using the Bay Trail, as long as they're not scooping down and eating handfuls of the material, I think they're going to be safe. Um, these sorts of things, exposure to these chemicals, are things that have to be incredibly high concentration, and or over a super long period of time. Uh, for an example, volatile chemicals, um, the there's these OSHA permissible exposure levels, and I know I'm sort of geeking out here, where people can be exposed to a particular volatile chemical at thousands of times the concentration that the DTSC and the water board consider safe. Um, and it's because the water board and the DTSC, they look at a human living on that one particular spot for, say, 75 years of their life, every day consuming a certain number of tablespoons of soil, of that contaminated soil, every day breathing X number of liters of that contaminated air. And so for the casual person who's walking by, um, you're probably in more risk of falling off your bicycle or being hit by a bicycle, than the risk from the contaminants. I think it's a good question, but uh, for people uh, to be, consider this unsafe for the people around there, uh, the concentrations have to be a lot higher.
Thank you, Martin. We have two more questions and we have 8 more minutes. I wanted to, before before I go to those questions, I wanted to say that there is a link to the survey to an evaluation in the chat. There's just a few questions. I will also be sending it out in an email. We would really appreciate if you answered them. It helps us with our direction, and it helps us when we talk to funders. Our next meeting will deal with the health impacts of the chemicals that are found on the site, and that should be in September or October. So we will go to Carolyn and then Kathy, and if we can make our questions kind of brief so we can we can hear both of them. Thank you. Go ahead, Carolyn.
So I'll just add on to, I put in the chat a photo of nearly 100 people, families, including young children that were in the marsh for a marsh cleanup. We had photos of children with mud on their faces. They obviously tracked all of that home. There are family pets from Marina Bay that go into the marsh and track that home. So it is not a trivial issue because the marsh has not been cleaned up. They did some soil removal 10, 15 years ago, but recent sampling has shown the contamination is now higher than it was before they did the cleanup. So just want to call that out. It's not a question per se. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And they don't do that anymore, thanks to you and other members of the CAG. Kathy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. I'm with the Gate Bird Alliance, and we've been working to get to the city to just take the trash. I'm also working with Nancy Parker and friends of Meeker Slough. And so the city now has a plan to go out and take remove the trash from Meeker Slough, not getting into the marsh, but just from the slough, which is not in the affected area that you've been discussing. And I guess DTSC is going to be the final arbiter of whether they're going to get a contractor and they're going to pull some stuff out after September when the Ridgeway rails are done nesting. And I figure I might as well raise it. Whether that's an issue for them because I've read a lot of the DTSC reports in the past and the amount of exposure, and they even talked about just brief cleanups could occur, though when we've sponsored them, we've never gone into the marsh. We sort of just do it on the edges, basically, off the Bay Trail. So the question, do you anticipate an issue with the city going and just pulling out the big trash in the slough that we all know has been there for years and keeps accumulating in terms of a significant hazard to the city worker or the contractor who will do that in a day, I would assume, or less than a day?
Yeah, I know when we work, we have health and safety plans, and part of it is a notification of the hazards. And it would, to me, it would seem reasonable to include the potential for pollution as a hazard that they should protect against. And for something like that, typically you would want to make sure that they're wearing protective clothing, so that if they get material on them, they can either brush it off, wipe it off, or actually just take off and throw away the clothing when they're done. And so, yeah, I don't know of any particular things that they would have to do other than be aware of it and plan accordingly.
Thank you. We've got one more question. Go ahead, Chip. Please unmute.
In response to that question and building on what Martin's concept of empowering the community to ask intelligent questions back to the agencies, that should be a question directed to the DTSC ecological ecotoxicologist. If you can't reach that person directly, I would suggest that you put that question to the project manager and have the response in writing or somehow come from the ecotoxicologist.
And you're referring to Kathy's question?
The woman that just spoke.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
The city is the one who will be doing it. So they're the one putting out the plan, getting a contractor, and DTSC will be looking at it. So I was just curious what Martin thought about whether this is going to be we're going to be, stop. They're going to be stopped by that. But yeah, they're going to a contractor because they don't have people who are trained or equipped anymore. So they're going to someone who will be.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. It would be really beautiful to see that stuff come out of Meeker Slough and the marsh beyond. I mean, why stop there? So once again, I urge you to please fill out the survey. We're so grateful to Martin for his comments and his expertise. He's a great guy to work with, and we will be having our next meeting on health impacts. We are working with a med student at UCSF who is compiling all the material that is available in all the databases on the health impacts of the chemicals at Zeneca. So stay tuned. And want to thank you all for coming and hanging out as in this space and for your abiding interest and support.
All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great
Thank
evening. Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Organizing us.